Playing this demo has been somewhat of a bittersweet experience for me. I saw the game when it was first announced, which wasn't actually that long ago, and I've been keeping an eye on it since then. I was actually quite happy to see a demo get released, and now that I've played everything it has to offer multiple times over, it seems to be in a rather good place. So why is it bittersweet? Well, basically the standard version of the game is going to be close to full price in the UK at £45, and a full price game in the US at $60. That in and of itself isn't an issue. The issue is that there won't be a physical release for the game in the West at all. It will get a physical release in some Asian territories, which isn't exactly uncommon, but the part that baffles me is that those versions include English text and English subtitles. I'm sorry, but if you're charging me full price or close to full price, you'd better offer me a physical copy. This means that while I did enjoy the demo, I probably won't be purchasing the full game, unless of course I want to pay even more for it from PlayAsia. Still though, I do like what I've played and I'm still going to break it down for those of you who might be interested. So what is SD Gundam Battle Alliance and what can you do in this demo? Well, it's a relatively basic action RPG where you take control of various SD Gundams or mobile suits from across the franchise. For those of you who might not know, SD means super deformed, and that refers to how the suits look with their big heads and weird proportions. The main plotline of the game is completely non-canonical, which means that it's not considered to have actually happened within the lore of the Gundam universes, but it does deal with canonical events. The way it does this is by having you play through small snippets of the official Gundam storylines and fixing the incorrect data. So for example, one of the first battles that you take part in has a section where you're supposed to be attacked by Rambaral in his Goth mobile suit. However, when he attacks, reality breaks down and you're instead attacked by Barbatos from the Iron-Blooded Orphans Gundam series. This is obviously completely incorrect, so as the player, you'll need to defeat Barbatos and then clear the other missions looking for data for the correct mobile suit, which in this case is the Goth. Once you have the correct data, you'll be able to play a second version of that original mission with the correct events. Once you beat that mission, that part of history is considered fixed. There's also some deeper and more mysterious plot lines revolving around the G-Universe, who or what is causing these breaks in history, and a brand new Gundam which is exclusive to this game called Gundam Latreia. The demo obviously doesn't go into these topics very much, but it does give you a small taste, and I found it to be quite interesting as a Gundam fan. The story is told through cutscenes and visual novel-style dialogue sections, although they aren't nearly as long as you might expect. You do have some options in terms of how you respond to certain things, but I don't think it makes any difference outside of a few different lines of dialogue. And as you might imagine, the game does not feature an English dub and contains Japanese voices only with English subtitles. The demo only contains a few break and true missions, which are what this game calls incorrect and correct timeline missions. The demo allows you to play as 6 different mobile suits, which include Zaku, Barbatos, Dom, Gun Tank, Gun Cannon, and the GM. You can also partially build the RX-78, but as far as I can tell, you can't actually unlock it in the demo. You'll be able to level each playable suit up to level 5 and level your partner's suits to 5 as well. The game allows you to equip 2 other suits as your partners, and you can choose who pilots them. When you bring them into battle, they'll gain XP, level up, and increase your friendship with them to unlock more bonuses. The max level of the suits will of course be higher in the main game, but I think the reason for this is that the data can carry over from the demo into the full game, so it kind of gives you a head start on building the RX-78 and leveling the other suits. I believe the money that you can earn is capped at 10,000 as well, which does make sense. Otherwise you could just infinitely grind the missions and basically pay your way through the main game, and they of course don't want you to do that. As you play through the different missions, you'll acquire lots of different parts and blueprints, as well as this game's currency, which is called Capital. The parts are essentially equipable gear pieces that give you various bonuses. In the demo, the parts are of course pretty basic, but it does tell you that you can find parts in the full game with up to 3 bonuses on each of them, making for some really nice combinations. I suppose you could do some minor build crafting in this game, considering that the suits are split into 3 types, which are close combat, ranged combat, and all-rounders. You could probably try to find parts that help a ranged mobile suit to hit harder, or give a close combat suit a ton of HP, for example. It's really not that much of a bad system, I really do like it. The blueprints are actually fragmented, and you need to find a certain amount of them to unlock, or as this game calls it, develop that specific mobile suit. So if you're trying to unlock, let's say, I don't know, Wing Zero Custom from Gundam Wing, you'd need to play the missions where you can loot that suit's blueprints. Once you have enough of these blueprints, the suit gets developed and becomes playable. Now, I already mentioned that you can use the parts to upgrade the mobile suits, but you can also spend capital to boost the stats of your choice, which will level up the suit overall. You can choose from HP, boost, melee, and range, and again, while the demo is very limited, I imagine you could create some strong stat-based builds when you take all of the game systems into account. Gameplay-wise, it's not quite as button-mashy as it first appears. It's not like a Muso or Warriors game, it's much more deliberate in your movements and attacks. I mean, you do have this boost gauge that kinda determines how many actions you can realistically take in one combo, although this can be extended using some of the more advanced techniques. When you're in your standard combat though, you can perform light attacks, a heavy attack, jump, and dodge. You can also hold the light attack button to perform a spinning slice, and hold the heavy attack button to launch enemies into the air in preparation for an air combo. On the two shoulder buttons, you've got two different skills which are unique to each mobile suit. On the right trigger, you can fire your main ranged weapon, and on the left trigger you can guard, although that guard can be broken if you're not careful. It's worth noting that you can, thankfully, lock on to enemies and switch between them quickly, which does help greatly when trying to use the ranged attacks. I think the general movement and combat feels quite a bit slower than I was personally expecting. I don't think it's bad or anything like that, it just takes a bit of getting used to. It's a bit slower than you might expect it to be. Fighting the grunt enemies isn't a problem as they will always stagger when you hit them, but when fighting some of the bosses it can be a little bit frustrating at first. I tried all of the battles on easy and normal, and to be honest there isn't really much of a difference. I think you just take a little bit less damage and get less rewards on easy. When fighting one of the game's bosses you need to wear down their blue gauge, which when depleted will stun them and make them vulnerable to attacks. Normally they have what's known in the industry as hyper armor and they won't stagger when you attack them, so your best bet is to generally just avoid their attacks with dodges, get a few hits in, retreat, and then repeat the process until you break the gauge. The enemies don't seem to hit too hard, but if you do find yourself taking a ton of damage, you can retreat and hold down on the D-pad to use a repair kit. You can also revive fallen teammates in the same way if you need to. I would assume that the revival mechanic will be used in the multiplayer co-op mode, but I wasn't able to test that, so I can't really say for sure. Lastly, let's quickly talk about the visuals. I played this on a PS5, and from what the menus are telling me, it looks like the game has ray tracing enabled on this version, and you can choose between frame rate and resolution. I went with frame rate as I usually do, but in terms of the actual visual design versus visual fidelity, I think it looks really clear, clean, and crisp. That said, I think the environments are generally quite bland, and a lot of the assets like ground textures and buildings, things like that, are very low res. I wouldn't go as far as saying that they look bad or awful or something like that, because during gameplay I honestly didn't really notice it. It was only during a few cutscenes, so I think it's more than passable. As far as I'm concerned, I think the mobile suits themselves look pretty great. They have nice details, they're well animated, lots of nice particle effects to go with their attacks, and all in all, yeah, quite nice. Sometimes the game does zoom in on them and the textures on them can look a little bit rough, but I think that's acceptable, and from any kind of distance I think they look really good. I suppose some people out there might not be a fan of the SD style, but I personally have no issue with it. I would say I'd probably prefer it to be a similar type game but with standard looking mobile suits, but it is what it is and I don't really have a problem with it. In fact, while I think about it, if you've never played it, I would suggest taking a look at Gundam Breaker 3. It wasn't actually released in the West, but the physical Asia English version is surprisingly common, so you might be able to pick it up on eBay or something like that. It's got a very similar setup in terms of gameplay, but in that game, you're essentially collecting and building custom Gundam model kits, which I thought was pretty cool, as someone who's a fan of the Gundam model kits. Give that a look if it sounds interesting. I used to own it, and I might pick it up again just so I can show it off on the channel. But yeah, the demo for SD Gundam Battle Alliance is pretty cool. I quite enjoyed it, and it's available right now on pretty much all current platforms if you want to give it a try. Sadly, as I mentioned, there will be no physical copy for any system in the West. That means you'll have to pay full price for a download, but if you really like the game and you have some spare cash, you can order the Asia English version from somewhere like PlayAsia if you want to. The full game is out on the 25th of August 2022. In my opinion, the demo for SD Gundam Battle Alliance did a good job of piquing my interest in the full game, only to then find out that they won't be releasing it physically in the West. I completely understand that some of you don't mind downloads or actually prefer them in some cases, and I do get it, I genuinely do. The convenience is great and they absolutely have their place, but to me, it's simply not right to charge that kind of price and not give you the option of a physical copy. Especially when Bandai Namco didn't pay for a dub and they have DLC already lined up and announced before the game even releases. I don't really know what to say, it just bothers me. Ultimately though, the game does actually seem to be pretty good. I really enjoyed the demo and I played the content through multiple times to max out the levels of the playable suits. If I'm being honest, I think I would have bought this day one if it was on disc. I genuinely like it, and perhaps if it drops to half price in a sale in the future, I may still pick it up. I found it to be quite fun to play, the upgrading and unlocking mechanics are engaging, and it does look pretty good most of the time. As I always say, I would urge you to try it before you buy it and take some time to consider if the download-only situation bothers you. Unfortunately, it is one of those things that bothers me. It is a shame that I won't get to play this one for a while, but I think I'll keep my saved game and maybe one day, fingers crossed, I'll get to enjoy it. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.